Հյուգո, շատ շնորհակալ եմ, որ ընդունել ես մեր հրավերը եւ համաձայնեցիր պատասխանել մեր հարցերին։ Հատկապես երկրորդ համաշխարհային պատերազմից հետո մենք տեսանք, որ կինոն եւ արվեստը փորձեց համարժեք պատասխան տալ պատերազմին ու ներկայացրեց այն սարսափը եւ այն դաժանագույն կողմը, որը ունի պատերազմը։ Եվ կարծես այդ համարժեք պատասխանի մեջ մի հույս կար, որ գուցե աշխարհը եւս կհասկանա եւ այլևս այդպեսին չի լինի։ Բայց տեսնում ենք, որ պատերազմները շարունակվում են եւ գլոբալ կատաստրոֆաների եւ մեծ խնդիրների առաջ է այսօր աշխարհը կանգնած եւ կրկին հիմքում մարդն է ու պատերազմներն են։ Ինչ ես կարծում, արդյոք արվեստը ունի դեռևս հնարավորություն փոխելու աշխարհը եւ ստեղծելու մի աշխարհ, որն ավելի լավն է, որտեղ պատերազմներ գուցե չլինեն այլևս։
Yeah, it is a fantastic question, also a very complicated one, because I feel like it is about two things at a separate time. At the one hand, art already makes the world a better place. It has made the world a more beautiful place. It has made the world a more interesting place. It has given countless of people, maybe everybody on the whole world, an avenue of escape, of thought, a place for reflection, a place where they can dream and wonder. And this already, in the face of these evils and horrors that you're explaining, is better. It already has made things better. It has given relief, it has given comfort, inspiration, the will to live, the will to fight. All of these things are already encapsulated in art, in the art that we create, but also the art that we consume, that we want to see, that we want to experience. So definitely it makes the world a better place, but the other part of the question is that implies that art can somehow have the political impact to make a war stop, or to make people see maybe matters in a peaceful manner so we can prevent wars. This is very complicated because that entails that art maybe has a higher power over politics than politics has over art. And to be honest, this is a question that is maybe too hard to answer in this context, because the two things are, of course, always interlinked, right? It's like art has given us maybe visions of a future that some people have, tried to realize, the way that, for instance, Nazi Germany tried to use romantic art of the Germany of yore to present their version of how they would like to see the world, right? Art can be used as propaganda as well, so it implies that it can also be used for the other way, that humanist art can maybe warm the hearts and souls of people and turn them into kinder, more gentle, loving and forgiving people as well. Again, it's not definitive because, as you said, there's still wars going on, so art didn't save us. But in a sense it did. Maybe even though all of these immoral things are happening, art is still giving us a moral escape. It is still giving us a place where we can be the better versions of ourselves. The only downside then is it can't change everything. Art can't replace politics, and that's the thing that art itself also has to reckon with. That we're sometimes also powerless. That the forces of history, how they collide, how they shape themselves, is too big to reckon with in a single work of art. It can't change the world, but it can reflect on it. And as I said in the beginning, it can make the world better solely by existing, by being there for all of us.
COVID-ի ժամանակ, երբ որ կային այդ բոլոր սահմանափակումները, կինոփառատոները եւ շատ տարբեր միջոցառումներ կինոյի հետ կապված իրենց տեղը գտան առցանց հարթակում եւ թվում էր, որ ամեն ինչ շատ լավ է տեղի ունենում, այսինքն եւ ժողովներ էին տեղի ունենում, եւ ֆիլմերի պրեմիերաներ, եւ վաճառքներ էին տեղի ունենում, բայց հենց մի փոքր այդ սահմանափակումները վերացան, մենք տեսանք, որ նորից կինոփառատոները սկսեցին իրականացվել։ Ըստ քեզ ինչով են կարևոր կինոփառատոները եւ ինչ կկորցնի կինոն, եթե չլինեն կինոփառատոները։
Yeah. Well, film festivals, there are so many things at the same time, right? It's a place, it's a platform, a podium for film, which is important because, of course, art needs to be seen, just like film, it needs to be experienced. So it sheds light on the new works that are created by filmmakers and artists. This already is important. Also, it's a place where films are being put into a context. If you take the Golden Apricots Film Festival, if there would be only one film, it would be isolated. It doesn't tell that much except for what the film itself is telling. But if you accompany all of these other films, a story emerges that is bigger than the single work of art, right? So films can raise each other as well and like collectively become something bigger, and festivals have that role. They should also see that responsibility and take that. And then thirdly, it is of course in the eyes of the beholder that films come to life. And of course we can displace all of these things to the internet, and we should be grateful that in times of the pandemic we had the internet, right, so that we could still access those films. But at the other hand, if you see what's happening now here as well in Yerevan, and you can see that people are also giving meaning to art, but people can also exchange their ideas with each other, and that can raise the meaning as well, right? Art is not the end point, it's the begin point. It's the point where you have conversations amongst audience members, between the audience and the director, between directors, between the festival staff, just casual onlookers. All of them are part of this beautiful ecosystem. So totally, I 100% believe that film festivals have a unique place in our art world, or in the world of cinema, and a very important place and a huge responsibility, because together we are again shaping the future of film. And I see festivals kind of like shepherds or herders of sheep, in the sense that they have to guide all of us to this new place, this place of greener pastures, you know, where we are all being nourished by the films that are on display. So yeah, totally, I'm very happy that we're finally now at a place where we can do this collectively and in person, because doing that in person also reinforces how much of a bodily experience film is. We have to experience it not only with our mind and with our eyes, but with our entire being, and this is what's happening here right now.
Հյուգո, արդեն 5 տարի է ես աշխատում եմ իմ ուսանողների հետ, եւ իմ ուսանողները 12-ից 18 տարեկան տարիքային սահմանափակման մեջ են, եւ ես նկատում եմ, որ իրենց համար շատ դժվար է գնալով նայել լիամետրաժ ֆիլմեր, եւ խոսքը արթհաուսային հեղինակային կինոյի մասին չի, կամ սև ու սպիտակ, ու ինձ թվում է TikTok-ը կամ Instagram-ը եւ այդ տեսակ ուրիշ ծրագրերը որոշակիորեն փոխում են կինոյի լեզուն։ Եվ ինչ ես կարծում, ինչ ազդեցություն դա կարա ունենա ընդհանրապես գլոբալ իմաստով կինո լեզվի եւ կինոմտածողության համար։
Again, here the question is about two things. It's a thing about our collective attention span, which is a thing that I've also noticed. You know, we were just now talking about the pandemic as well, being at home all the time and also being very nervous about what was happening in the world, being on my phone all the time, watching the news. It made me also less concentrated. I had more trouble reading books, I had more trouble sitting down, being mindful and watching a film from the comfort of my own home, as I used to enjoy much more before. I had trouble getting back into enjoying that, because it was just, you know, my brain was kind of like shut up by all of this like information flows and all of this kind of like overload of what was happening in the world. So I totally see this happening, and especially with the younger generation maybe that's more accustomed to being on their phone all the time, witnessing, in, as you say, all these different kinds of videos that are being made, that indeed I think are changing our perception of what a video should be. And let's be honest, most film now is also just video. It's a digital file shot on digital cameras, like the ones we have here for this show. So the kind of like the essence of what is cinema and what is video is already changed a lot, I would say. I think this could be seen as a bad thing, and many people will try to warn us about the outcomes of this, that it will, you know, endanger the purity of cinema, and that it will make for a lousier audience that is less tolerant to, yeah, not only art house films, but also just longer films in general. At the other hand, maybe it's an invitation, right? I try to see a lot of things from an optimist perspective, and I do believe that cinema itself should also never stay the same. It should always change, and it should always reflect the times in which it is being made. And the times that we are living now, they are a lot focused on the digital world. We are not only here physically now, we are also in our brains, in our fingertips. We are online, even if we don't necessarily feel that way. I think it's not bad if cinema manages to reflect that, if it manages to find new forms to show stories, to show the world as it is. But again, you know, it is a challenge for cinemas itself, for movie theaters, for festivals. How then do you take those kids that are on their phone all the time and convince them that there's also this other world, that they can go inside a place where they can put down their phone and be inside a movie screen and see film in the way that it was once conceived and meant to be seen, and I think still has a lot of merit and value. I'm sometimes worried about this, what's the future of cinema, how many of the audience will still be left if the old generations just simply are becoming too old to go to the cinema and the new ones have to replace them. But then again, I have to remind myself that even in these times, people still meditate, people still pray, people still reflect, they still go to musea, they still take walks to relax their mind. So why wouldn't they also go to the cinema? I have to believe that it will all turn out to be okay. But film needs to be mindful of this. They can't resist the changes, because then it will become an archaic art form. And I think cinema should never be archaic. It should always look forward.
Երբ որ մենք խոսում ենք կինոյի պատմության մասին եւ թարապես կինոյի լեզվի մասին, մենք շատ հաճախ հղումներ ենք անում ժանրերին կամ կինոյի տեսակներին, ասենք խաղարկային կինո, վավերագրական կինո, անիմացիոն կինո եւ կարճամետրաժ կինո, բայց տեսնում ենք, որ այսօր այդ տեսակի հղումները կարծես այլ ակտուալ չեն ու կինոն կարծես այլ ուղղությամբ է գնում եւ նույնիսկ կինոփառատոները հրաժարվում են առանձին մրցութային ծրագրեր ունենալ անիմացիոն, խաղարկային կամ վավերագրական կինո եւ մի մրցութային ծրագրում են ընդգրկում այդ ֆիլմերը։ Ըստ քեզ ինչին է դա ուղղված։ Արդյոք կինոն դրանով նոր լեզու փնտրելու ճանապարհի վրա է եւ ինչի կհանգեցնի դա։
I think it's a great sign of breaking down these also archaic hierarchical structures, the belief that a fiction feature film has more worth or merit than an animation film or a documentary film, or, as you said also, rightfully so, a short film.
Yeah.
I think everybody deep down in their heart knows that that's nonsense, because it's like going to a museum and saying that the bigger the painting, the better it is, right? I've been to museums and seen the tiniest paintings that have blown me more away than a major, huge Picasso or something. The whole point of art is that it can't be boxed down, it can't be boxed in, it can't be put in these categories and the art is supposed to kind of align with those notions that we have of it. If that would be the case, then filmmakers would only make films to please our expectations. And the whole point is, of course, to go beyond our expectations, to leave the expectations at the door and be at the mercy of the vision of the artist, of the director. So that can happen in a short film as well. I also program a festival in the Netherlands, and I also decided to not have a hierarchy between short and feature films, because it's not about the length of the film, it's about finding the right format for the story and for the form of the story to flourish, right? And you can do that in 12 minutes and you can do that in 120 minutes. So I think it's very good, and I think it's a sign of festivals also changing, which I think is also very good. There's all of these old notions of how a film festival should look like, what it should feel like, how it should work from the inside. You have big festivals like Cannes and Venice, of course, that are in that sense very traditional and still try to maintain those old boundaries, because that is, in that form, they became the biggest film festivals of the world, so they try to hold on to that. And I think it's actually good that they do that, so that every other festival in the world can innovate and can go into a new direction and can become different from Cannes, because we don't only need Cannes, we need a whole variety of festivals, because there's a whole variety of films. So I'm very happy with this development, and I applaud it, and I wish that we could take it even further, to the next level.
Okay, but what do you think? Is it about the cinema trying to find a new language, and how is it important for cinema, for new day cinema, to find a new language, or is still going on with the old one?
It's a good question. I wish that cinema would sometimes insist more on finding a new language, and you can see it in experimental film, which is often also short form, because it's not necessarily only about the length of things, but also just about the visual experience of watching film. You see people trying to find new images, new forms, new languages, as you say. This I also find very interesting, and I wish that you know, on a bigger scale, it would happen more. You still see very much, for instance, especially in the kind of like feature fiction realm, that many films kind of want to look and feel the same. You know, we have this kind of art house format of what a film is supposed to be. It's functional, it works, it gets the point across, but sometimes I feel like I am already done with it, and I hope that filmmakers and festivals and audiences and critics would also move along and push it forward, right? Because we are at this time now, also going back to the previous question, where all of these crazy things are happening at once, all of these different inputs are being given to us. And then why should cinema still refuse to move along? Why should it still try to look and feel the same? I don't think this is a good idea. So yeah, I think it's an invitation that festivals, if they are changing the structures, it is an invitation for filmmakers to also change along and come with crazier stuff and just see if it gets into the competition. Like a great example here at the festival, Albert Serra is now one of the main guests. His film Pacifiction is a fantastic work of art, and I would say that it is one of the most important films of the year. A film that is indeed trying to find a new language, but on a massive scale. It feels like a very big, important, major movie, but it's in its core very weird, very experimental. And that film was playing in the main competition of Cannes, right? Which is, let's be honest, a quite traditional film festival. So I think this is great. Here you see what you can do on that platform as a kind of artist. So he's for me a very inspirational person because he's already doing that. And I think he's also paving the way for others to follow along in his footsteps and go to the next level maybe.
Հյուգո, կարող ես ինձ մի ֆիլմի օրինակ բերել, թեև դու արդեն քո խոսքում նշեցիր ինչ-որ ֆիլմերի օրինակներ, բայց մեկ ֆիլմ, որը 21-րդ դարում է նկարահանվել ու դու կարծում ես, որ դա մեր ժամանակակից եւ նոր ժամանակի կինոյի լավագույն օրինակն է։
I really love this question because this is one of my favorite subjects, is also thinking about this. You know, I am like from the 21st century, as in I was born in the 1990s and I came of old age in the 21st century, so it is also my film culture, part of what I grew up with, and that I have seen changing in real life. But what I'm very interested in is also seeing the weird films at the beginning of the 21st century that gave a promise of making this new film language that we talked about, and that you then also can see on the mainstream level that they didn't choose that path and they went for something more generic. So one of my favorite directors, I also wearing a shirt of his, is Michael Mann. This is Heat, his 1995 film, which is definitely a 20th century masterpiece. But in the 21st century, in 2006, he made a film, Miami Vice. It's a remake of the television series of the 1980s as well. It's a completely digitally shot film and looks and feels like no other mainstream blockbuster film that I have ever seen in the 21st century. Why? Because it totally embraces what it means to be digital. The whole film has this kind of like, not quite pixelated, but a kind of like grainy, overclocked feel to it, because he takes the digital cameras that we're now also using and really push them to their limits to really go into the nightlife of Miami Vice or of Miami, like a world of crime and all of these things, and really try to show it in a new way that I think reflects the times that we're living in. It's a film that is about people from a traditional way of life, like fighting crime the old school way, you know? And they find themselves in a world where suddenly everything is becoming digital, where the old school style of like running into a room with a gun doesn't apply anymore, because the bad guys, they're not just, you know, stealing a safe or whatever in a bank. They're hacking, you know, they're on their phones, they're hacking into satellites, they're doing mass surveillance. It's globalized, they're not just in the United States, but they're everywhere all across the world. I really wished that there would be an alternate history where this kind of film could become the dominant one. But then you see 2 years later, you know, Iron Man comes out, the first real big Marvel Disney movie, and it has this kind of like slick, almost clinical digital sheen to it, and this becomes the dominant mode. Because why? It's easier to shoot, it's cheaper to shoot, it gives more flexibility to VFX artists to, in the post-production, add special effects. It's a more industrial product. And I think one of the things that 21st century could do is resist this, because we have enough of those industrial films that are just being made in the factory of Hollywood. We need the makers also on a mainstream level to push the aesthetic envelope further as well. And yeah, for me, Miami Vice, I'm literally planning to put a tattoo of the film on my body because it's one of my favorite films ever made, exactly for the question that you asked. So I'm very happy with the question.
Շնորհակալություն Հյուգո ժամանակի եւ հետաքրքիր պատասխանների համար. Thank you for being here and for interesting answers.